Tonight on the Daily Debrief.
And by the time I got there, they already had Hannah rushed into brain surgery.
Heartbreaking testimony from a victim's father as he takes the stand and describes injuries he says his little girl sustained at the hands of her babysitter. Plus, Washington is still in an uproar over an infamous document, the Mueller report, as both sides of the aisle fight over possible redactions, and the Attorney General tells Congress they could see a copy of the report very soon. Also, more charges are slapped against elite parents involved in the college admissions scandal. Find out the consequences they could face after allegedly bribing their children's way into college. The nation's most fascinating cases are on the Daily Debrief. It's Tuesday, April 9th. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Debrief. I'm Jesse Weber, in for Aaron Keller. Well, it just keeps getting worse for a set of elite parents involved in the college admissions scandal that shocked the nation. Here's the latest. And a lot more legal trouble for actress Lori Loughlin in the college admissions scam. Federal prosecutors Tuesday announced a superseding indictment against Loughlin, her fashion designer husband Massimo Giannulli, and 14 other parents. The indictment adds money laundering on top of the fraud charges they were already facing for allegedly paying bribes to get their children into elite universities. The new charges stem from the parents allegedly funneling bribes through William Singer's sham charity and for-profit corporation. On Monday, actress Felicity Huffman pleaded guilty to her charges along with 13 other parents. Law&Crime president Rachel Stockman says this shows the feds are not going easy on the parents.
People are outraged by this. They're very upset about what happened. And I have a feeling they're going to want to set an example here and say, you know what, parents, you cannot get away with this anymore.
According to Huffman's plea agreement, prosecutors have promised to recommend a prison sentence on the low end of the 4 to 10-month federal sentencing guidelines. While Huffman admitted to paying a $15,000 bribe, Loughlin is alleged to have spent $500,000. This, along with the money laundering charges, means Loughlin could face harsher penalties than Huffman.
I don't think she's going to get 20 years in prison. I think more likely, and according to the prosecutor's recommendation, that they would recommend 2.5 years for this particular crime.
Well, let's break it down. And joining me is criminal defense attorney Kenney Baden. Linda, great to see you.
Nice to see you, Jesse.
How did they get money laundering here?
Oh, God, this is so fabulous. It's like Al Capone. Remember, what happened here is these parents donated to the charity that was set up by the person helping them to get their kids into college. And then they took it as a tax deduction. So therefore, when they claim it as a tax deduction, it becomes money laundering. It's money that it's not. It's put through another area.
It's just fascinating to talk. Aunt Becky, Uncle Jesse thinking about Aunt Becky doing this.
I know.
What could be the punishment? Do you agree with Rachel here that it would be on the lower side? Could we see something like 20 years in prison for this?
I doubt it. I mean, you have to look at the recent special counsel, Robert Mueller's report, the people that he prosecuted and what they got as a crime, what they got as a sentence for their crimes. It was, 7 years, 4 years. So I doubt they're going to see 20 years. First-time offenders, if they take responsibility, which, it could be a lot less.
Then again, they might want to make an example of them. And this is no
they're
joke
making an example of them because they're not letting them get away. They're going to go to prison.
What about the timeline of this, the timing of this? I mean, the charges dropped today. Does that have anything to do with her rejecting a plea deal?
I'm sure it does, because you saw that we had the one plea yesterday, right? That was taken, and then all of a sudden we have a superseding indictment. So probably what was offered, you take the plea, or we're going to indict you for further charges because that's what we have, or you can plead to further charges, and obviously that's exactly what's going on.
Real quick, 10 seconds. Does that mean a plea deal's off the table anymore?
No. Just be a bigger plea deal.
So you're waiting to see what happens next?
Yes, absolutely.
And this is not the end of it. I mean,
No,
every week
not.
we see something
No, it's
else.
not.
Who knows? It's just a very sad case and strange
It's sad,
case.
and how could they think this was legal? It's beyond me.
That's a good question. Linda, I want you to stand by. We've got
Okay.
a lot more to talk about. Well, after a week of testimony, we're still trying to figure out exactly what happened in the case of an Ohio babysitter accused of killing a young girl. Lindsay Partin is charged with murder, involuntary manslaughter, and 3 counts of endangering a child. The victim, Hannah Weshy, was just 3 years old when she died. Partin was babysitting her when the girl reportedly dumped ketchup in a toilet, which could be considered typical child behavior, according to the prosecutor. However, Partin allegedly decided to lash out. And according to the Butler County Sheriff's Office, she admits to hitting the child. Took the stand. and he told the jury that Hannah's first months alive were tough. She was weaned off of heroin after being born to a drug-addicted mother.
Born
in Louisville, Kentucky.
Did she have any difficulty at her birth?
She was addicted to drugs at birth.
And tell me about that process at birth and how long she was in the hospital and what happened from there.
She was in, Cozaire Children's Hospital in Louisville for 92 days. She was weaned off of methadone by morphine.
Where did she stay while she was in the hospital there?
In the NICU, the intensive care unit.
And with that, can you describe what type of care she needed?
She had different kind of tubes. She just had to have medicine to come down and wean her from the medicine that she was on to keep her from heroin. Her mother was addicted to heroin. So when her mother got arrested, the jail put her on methadone to keep the baby alive instead of withdrawing instantly from heroin.
Well, that's just awful. But Hannah's dad also explained his knowledge of injuries that she sustained in the week leading up to the day she lost consciousness. Here he confirms a few of Hannah's injuries that match up with what Partin told cops.
Between Monday, March 5th and Thursday, March 8th, were you aware of Hannah receiving any injuries?
Yes.
And how did you become aware of that?
Lindsay told me after I picked Hannah up.
Did that happen one day, multiple days? How many times were there conversations about injuries that Hannah had that week?
She fell in the driveway. I want to say 3.
Well, tell me, to your recollection, what injuries do you recall Hannah having in those days leading up to March 8th, and what Lindsay told you about those?
She had little bruises all over her chest and a pretty bad scrape on the chin. When I picked her up, Lindsay said that her and her daughter, Vivian, were playing in the driveway and Hannah had tripped over the heel of her boot and fell on the rocks. She had a bruise on her chin and a black eye. One day, Lindsay said that she had stepped up on top of a toy on wheels and the toy kicked out from underneath of her. And she fell on the handlebar. She fell on a step too, but I can't recollect if she told me that week or not about that.
He goes on to explain his timeline of events that fateful morning, including some of Hannah's odd behavior.
Right before we leave, I put Hannah's coat and shoes on. They're sitting, we usually sit on that little footstool that's sitting there by the wall. Put her coat and shoes on, I text Lindsay, and we head out.
Where did you go at that point?
To my car and drove over to Lindsay's house.
How do you put her in the car?
Typically she sits up front, but that morning she laid in the back seat.
And is that always how she rides in your car?
No.
Why does she ride in your car that way?
Why did she? I'm not sure. It was not common for her to. Usually when I go to Lindsay, she wants to sit in my lap because she liked to drive. But that morning she didn't want to get in the front seat. She wanted to lay in the back seat.
And how far is it for you to get there?
About 300 feet.
What did you do that morning once you got to Lindsay's then?
We got out of the car. When I took her in, I gave her hugs and kisses. And that morning was a little different because she kept asking for a kiss over and over and over again. And then they went inside and I went down to my shop. I started my truck.
Gene, how did you bring Hannah into the home? If you recall specifically that
I
day.
was carrying her. I had a blanket over her.
And where did you take her into?
The back door of the garage.
And where did you leave her?
In the garage.
Who did you leave her there with?
Lindsay, Partin.
And how did Lindsay take her from you? Did you hand her over so Lindsay was carrying her? Did you set her down? How did that work? If you recall.
I want to say I set her down, but I could have handed her to Lindsay and she set her down. I know they walked in the house when I walked away. I can't recall if I handed her to Lindsay because she was really wanting to kiss me. I don't know if I handed her to her and then she set her down or if I set her down. But they walked in the house.
He also tells the jury about Hannah's deteriorating condition before 911 was called and how Hannah was finally taken to a hospital.
Hannah was on the floor, not in the garage or in the kitchen. There was a room in between when he first walked in. I leaned down and I was trying to tell her to breathe because she wasn't really breathing. I ended up picking her up and taking her into the garage and laying her on the couch. Lindsay was kind of walking around asking what she should do. I told her to call 911, and then she called 911.
Tell me about what happened when she got Hannah to the couch.
She was kind of gasping for air. She wasn't really breathing. I kept telling her to breathe, and when I'd tell her to breathe, she'd take a breath and then let it out slow, and then she wouldn't take another breath until I yelled at her or I said her name, and then she'd take another breath, and then it would come out slow. And then 911 EMS showed up, or the ambulance came.
And what happened at that point?
They came in and they took over. They ended up getting Hannah on a stretcher, and we left. We went to Fort Hamilton Hospital. I drove my own car. I followed the ambulance. So the EMS, or the ambulance drivers and the first responders, and then I followed them in my vehicle.
And then what?
We went into the hospital. They were saying that it looked like she might have blood on the brain. I thought she had an aneurysm. Lindsay showed up a little bit later, and we were in the hall just waiting to hear what was going on. They ended up air carrying her to Children's Hospital from there, and I drove to Children's.
Did Hannah ever regain consciousness?
No, ma'am.
When did she die?
On March 18th, 2018.
Linda Kenney Baden joins me once more. Linda,
Yeah.
how do you think he did on the stand?
You know, I was mixed. First of all, I thought he was good on the cross-examination, that he held his demeanor and all, and she was really under attack. By the same token, there was something that bothered me, that he has seen bruises on his child over the weekend, and she comes home with a black eye, and he doesn't take her to the emergency room for that. So there was some disconnect that bothered me, but I don't know if the defense made enough of it that would make the jury have reasonable doubt in this case.
I mean, a lot of it, I think he thought was, he took Lindsay's word for it about these injuries. He said there was nothing that seemed to be warranting going to a hospital, but was there anything that he said that conflicted with what we heard from Lindsay Partin in those police interviews, or does it seem pretty consistent?
Well, here's what the defense was trying to do, that he didn't go down and start his truck, that the timeline was that she called 911, not when he's there and he's telling her to call 911. That's what they're trying to say, to make him look not credible and she looks more credible. But, you know, there was other stuff, because remember, the night before he's supposed to go out and buy cereal and milk and feed the daughter in the morning, and according to the medical professional, she wouldn't have been able to eat cereal in the morning if that injury, the injury was prior. It had been prior, but she would if the injury was subsequent to her arriving at Lindsay's house.
And you know, I mean, look, there's a lot that we can dissect about this, but the thing that I'm just still confused about is, do you have a clear sense of when this girl received these injuries?
No, I don't, and that's part of the problem I have for the prosecution case. There seems to be a lot of confliction. I mean, I know that if my child came home with a black eye, I would not be sending that child back to that daycare center or back to that person who was taking care of it. So I really have a question about when all the injuries occurred.
Well, is that why it's so important for Lindsay Partin to take the stand? We believe that the prosecution is resting their case, or is about to rest their case, and the state will, the defense will move on with their case. Do you think it's so important for Lindsay Partin
I think in this case, you know, normally I'm dead set against it, but I think the case she must take the stand. They have to see her in a better light than they saw her in the police interview, but she also would depend on how their medical examiner comes across. They're having Dr. Spitz testify tomorrow about the nature of the injuries and the time. So we'll see how he comes across, and then as defense attorney, I would make a decision.
20 seconds. What do you think he's going to say, this defense expert?
He's going to say that I'm sure the subdural hematoma may have had different areas that show that it was an age subdural, that it may have been re-injured, but it didn't occur on that morning at that time after this child was dropped off.
I got to tell you, there's a lot of questions I think we still all have in this case, and maybe we'll get more answers.
I don't know. It's a sad case.
It really is. Linda, stand by. Coming up, A man heads to court on charges that he stabbed a basketball player to death, and he's claiming it was in self-defense. Find out why. Plus, the fight over special counsel Robert Mueller's report continues as Attorney General William Barr testifies before Congress. Will the full report be released? That's the question, and we're going to bring you the details after the break. Coming up this week on Law and Crime, we'll take you inside an Iowa courtroom where a man is charged with fatally stabbing a college basketball player. Luke Van Hemert is charged with second-degree murder in the 2018 stabbing death of William Penn University basketball player Marquise Todd. Van Hemert claims he stabbed Todd in self-defense during a traffic-related incident. He's seeking immunity under Iowa's stand your ground law and says he should essentially be given the same legal leeway as defendants charged in Florida, which is another state with a stand your ground law. The judge in this case, though, says the state's laws are different and that Van Hemert has no legal argument. We'll bring you the trial live when it begins. A fight in Washington continues to simmer over the infamous Mueller report. This is as Attorney General William Barr testifies before Congress. Barr told members of the House of Representatives today that he expects to release a redacted version of the Mueller report sometime within the next week. He said that several types of information must be redacted before a copy of the report can be released. That includes grand jury information, any information that would reveal sources and their privacy, and any methods used to gather intelligence. Well, court is back in session in Michigan related to the Larry Nassar sex abuse scandal. A preliminary hearing for ex-Michigan State University President Lou Anna Simon continued after more than a month-long delay. Several witnesses took the stand to help determine whether the state has enough evidence to move forward with trial. Prosecutors say Simon misled investigators about her knowledge of Larry Nassar's alleged misconduct and investigations into his sexually inappropriate behavior with MSU athletes. Simon is charged with 4 counts of lying to police. Trial continues in a Florida courtroom where a man is accused of killing his daughter by allegedly throwing her off a bridge. John Johnchuk is accused of murdering Phoebe Johnchuk by tossing her into Tampa Bay. The question is whether the defendant is legally insane or whether he can be held criminally responsible. Prosecutors are trying him on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and aggravated fleeing and eluding officers. Today, a psychologist testified on behalf of the state and said, in his opinion, Johnchuk was not legally insane at the time he dropped Phoebe off the bridge. All right, let's go back to an Ohio courtroom where babysitter Lindsay Partin is on trial for allegedly killing Hannah Wesche, who was in her care. Partin's defense team questioned Hannah's dad about one of Hannah's bruises and whether or not he told a social worker if Partin was a good babysitter.
I apologize, I'm going to go back to the bruise on her butt cheek. Do you recall specifically asking Hannah if she'd got whooped, that was the result of that particular bruise?
No.
And do you recall giving a history at the hospital and Children's Hospital with those words at all?
About her being whooped? I don't recall that, no, ma'am.
You don't recall telling her, Reagan Kitzmeyer, the social worker that you spoke to that day and gave a history?
No, ma'am, I don't recall that.
So you don't recall saying that when you gave her a bath and saw that bruise, that you asked her if she got whooped, and instead Hannah said she'd fallen on a step?
I don't recall that. It's possible. I was under a lot of stress at that time. I'm not sure.
Understandable. You recall telling the social worker that you had no concerns about Lindsay Partin as a caregiver for your child?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sure I said that.
Huh, that's interesting. And things got really testy as Partin's defense attorney hammered Hannah's dad about where he parks his car and how long it takes him to leave home every morning. Here, the defense questions him about potential injuries Hannah could have sustained in his car.
And you've already agreed with me that it was cold that day. You probably had snow on your car, correct?
Yes.
And you'd agree with me that your car doesn't immediately warm up, correct?
No, ma'am.
It does?
I said no, ma'am. It does not immediately warm up.
Okay. And so you'd agree with me that you had to wait a little bit for the car to warm up before you put it in reverse, correct?
No, ma'am.
You didn't?
No, ma'am.
You immediately shoved that thing into reverse and got the heck out of the driveway?
Yeah, when I'm leaving for work, yes, ma'am. I started
Is
my
that when
car.
Hannah fell in the back seat and hit her head?
Hannah never fell in the back seat.
Are you certain?
I'm 100% certain.
Because if she fell in the back seat, climbing over the front seat and hit her head, and it killed her, then you'd be responsible. Isn't that true?
I assume I would, yes, ma'am, but Hannah did not
So
fall in
that's
the
why you're
back
pretty
seat.
certain that that's not what happened.
No, ma'am.
Linda Kenney Baden joins me once more. I told you, Testy, how did the defense do at putting the blame, that's what it seems they were doing, putting the blame on Jason Wesche?
I thought they were more effective with the whole idea of the serial rather than in the morning, because the whole defense is going to be that the dating of this subdural hematoma would have been from when he had custody, not when she had custody, just that morning. So I didn't like this questioning here from a defense point of view, although they did get under her skin. Also, you know, I'm unclear about how many bruises, where they were, when they were called. She should have a board. I mean, here's this bruise, you saw that, and here's this bruise, you said this. Here's this. We know there's been a lot of inconsistencies, but we don't know how they matter.
And they're saying, look, you know, she was abusing this girl on prior occasions. The one thing that I just don't understand is watching this, and, you know, we know that detectives first thought Jason Wesche might be responsible for this. Is there anything that you thought was suspicious about his actions or behavior during this whole event?
Well, the whole idea of when he went to get this cereal was suspicious, and what he told the caregivers at the hospital. And that, you know, the father is always the first one, and the babysitter is always the second one. But I think they honed in on her without looking at whether or not, someone I was with this morning was listening to this and said, I think they both abused her. I think the father also hit her. So it was very interesting how people have different reactions.
Let's play devil's advocate real quick, about 20 seconds. Do you think the defense lost any goodwill by grilling a father who lost his child?
Grilling in the wrong way, yes, because they never modulated. They never said, okay, let's talk about this, and then said, you lied here, right? And make that the point rather than, I'm at you, I'm at you, I'm at you. So I thought that was not a good strategy.
Linda, thanks so much for watching so
Thank
carefully.
you.
I know you're going to be watching tomorrow as
Yeah.
well. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on tonight.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Glad to be
this
here.
is just a really sad case, and we're all trying to get...
Very sad case.
Yeah, we're all trying to get some answers. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us and watching on the Daily Debrief tonight. I want you to join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. Our live trial coverage begins at 9 a.m. Eastern. And until then, have a great night. See you tomorrow.